the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no Great War, no Great Depression. Our Great War is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives.
Hey, right.
Hey, come out,
Right,
punch, man.
right. Circle left.
Stand still, huh?
Get ready. 1 o'clock. Good. 12. 5 to 3. I got mixed up.
There is no way that you could have been as bad at hockey as you are at golf.
All right, let's go. You like that, old man? You want a piece of me?
I don't want a piece of you. I want the whole thing.
You know, funny enough, I still have not seen that movie. Not a big Adam Sandler fan. Hey, I'm Mark. I am the Cinemaniac. You watching this probably dig flicks, in which case you are a Cinemaniac. And together, as a whole, singing along, we are the titular Cinemaniacs. So Adam Sandler and Uncut Gems that I talked about last week, indie film by the Safdie brothers that everybody is going crazy about, that is his big dramatic role. He's done it before, but this is for a lot of people new to them that this is a big dramatic role. Not nominated for any Oscars. Outrage. Craziness. That some film that somebody specifically likes is not recognized by a bunch of people who are doing their own private thing on the other side of the country. Hey, how are you? And not a lot of films to talk about this week. I only really saw one in the theater, saw a couple on home video, and we'll talk about all those. See, it used to be that I would try to jam-pack a show with like 8 to 10 to 12 to 17 movies, and I would just ravel through them as fast as I could, mush-mouth, mumbling, not really saying much of substance. This time we only have 5 movies, so I can say even more things mush-mouthedly with even less substance. First, we have a film. We'll go over here. Why not? We have a second camera, might as well use it. We have a film that just won some Golden Globes about a week ago. Just Oscar nominations came out today. This is on the list for Best Picture and Director and some other things. Film set long ago in World War I, in the battlefields in no man's land. 2 young soldiers on a mission, handed a document. You need to get this from here to there or a lot of people are going to die. When was this film set? Well, I'll tell you by the year. It was 1917. Wow. So I saw this trailer, like a lot of you have, and I thought, yeah, that looks interesting. It's a war movie. Not huge on war movies, but you know, there's some that I've liked a lot. And what I got was a 2-hour, consistently ratcheting up the tension movie that just grips you by the scruff of the neck and sticks your nose in it, and my God. So people who like Uncut Gems, a lot of people have been talking about Uncut Gems and said it's, you know, it's insanely tense and they needed a drink afterwards and they were rattled and they still couldn't get over how tense it was. If you just want to send yourself over the edge, why don't you watch 1917 and follow it up with Uncut Gems, or vice versa. Because this movie starts off, you see the 2 leads, the 2 soldiers are just hanging out against a tree during a little bit of downtime during the war. Somebody says, the general wants to talk to you. They go to the general and he says, he lays out the mission that they have to do, which is incredibly important. One of their brothers is involved in why this is important. And it's these 2 guys who have nothing but whatever they're carrying, which ain't much. These rifles that fire 1 shot at a time. That's great when a biplane is shooting at you. These guys have to go across no man's land through enemy territory, which they think has been maybe abandoned, maybe not, by enemies, and they have to get word to this other regiment to do or not do something. I'm not going to give any more of it away than that. 2 guys have to go do something. And you get maybe 60 seconds. Maybe it's 3 minutes. It ain't much of this film's running time before the tension starts, and it does not stop for 2 hours. This film is being, like I said, it won some Golden Globes. It was Best Drama, Best Director, and Best Score. It's nominated for 10 Academy Awards. I thought it was amazing. It was fantastic, mostly because it put me somewhere I've never been quite like that before, and it put me there. A lot of filmmakers now think putting you there is shaking the camera a lot and keeping the camera an inch from what's going on and making you feel disoriented by not being able to see what the hell's going on in a movie. Sam Mendes doesn't do that. He knows how the human body and brain actually works. And if I take you and I shake you by the lapels, your whole world is not a blur. If you are in an accident, your world shakes a little, but it's relatively stable because the eyes and the brain do that. So in this film, what we have is what appears to be one uninterrupted take. Like the camera never edits, the camera never goes from one shot to another, the camera is fluidly moving around, behind, in front of these people where they're going. You are with these two characters for the entire film. It unfolds more or less in real time. I was telling a friend about it, and I said, it unfolds like a 24 episode unrolled in real time. Yeah, it's an hour, but a hell of a lot of stuff goes on in that hour. Maybe more than really would in real life. If you go back and think about it, we're like, wow, those guys really went through a lot in 2 hours. Forget about that. Basically what this serves to do, they want an uninterrupted shot. Now I've seen movies that do that, and it's made me uncomfortable because you're waiting for a cut. The language of film that you've grown up with all your life is that you're going to cut and see different perspectives, and there's a rhythm to that. And sometimes when that doesn't happen, it creates the feeling of claustrophobia or tension, or it's driven me crazy before. I didn't really notice it in this. I knew they didn't pull off a film of this magnitude in 2 hours by hitting record on that digital or roll, if it was film that they shot on. They didn't hit start and then stop 2 hours later and the film was done. There are edits. There's sneaky edits. It's like Alfred Hitchcock's Rope. It was done, in one take or long takes. In Rope, you can really see where the edits were. If you have a critical eye, and because there's special effects now can do things that it doesn't even look like an edit, and it is. But I could sort of see where they may have joined shots together. But it appears that there's no interruption in the shot. And what that serves to do is it doesn't give you an escape. It makes you feel like you're there. It makes it feel more realistic. What's going on around you is realistic. You're only seeing more or less what the characters can turn their heads and see from their perspective. So if somebody is shooting at them, you're not getting a shot from where the sniper's roost is. You're with that character, and you're, like them, are trying to look around and see where that sniper might be and how to avoid being shot and killed. It's incredibly tense all the way through, because even when it is seemingly calm, when they are sent out onto the battlefield and just before they go over that ridge, the commanding officer, who thinks they're insane and will die, says, try to find some cover. And they go up over the ridge and there's nothing. There's a few trees here and there, and there might be somebody out there that they can't see who's going to take them out. And it's just, it is never not tense to me. There are quieter moments in the film, but even then I felt like at any time something bad could happen, because they're in enemy territory, it's war, they're two dudes with barely anything to defend themselves, and my God, how far are they going to get? There's no guarantee they're going to get to the end, and I'm certainly not going to tell you how the film wraps up, but it was really, really impressive to me. Now, I went to see this opening night here in town, where we record this at Keene Cinemas, and it was a pretty full crowd. I think probably largely because this had just won a Golden Globe like a night or two before, or a few nights before, and it's award shows exist for people to, make note of achievements of people they like, or friends of theirs, or whatever, but award shows are televised and promoted, and there are big campaigns for things to win awards, because once something wins an award, a lot more people want to see it than had before, for whatever reason. So it was a big crowd, and it was a chatty crowd. A lot of times when I go to the theater locally here to see an opening night film on a Thursday, I'm always surprised how lean the crowd is. It's not, I always figure, it's opening night, people really want to see this. And it's like, yeah, people want to see a movie on Friday and Saturday. So I was surprised to see such a big crowd to a degree, and they were very chatty. And the lights went down and the trailers started playing, and they continued to be chatty. And I was like, oh God, it's going to be one of these crowds. But let me tell you, once things started happening in the movie, you could have heard a pin drop for the rest of the film. It was dead silent right up to the end credits. And it was like, that is the power of a film. Same thing happened when I saw Mad Max Fury Road in a nearby town. The crowd was really chatty, even as the film started, and then after that first big action sequences, all you heard was people breathing. Actually, all you heard was a lot of people exhaling because they were just so tense they had been holding their breath through that. So 1917, performances are great. It's mostly a cast. Well, it's a cast you might know. What's his name? Let's see here. Somebody I'm not terribly familiar with. Dean Charles Chapman, who apparently was on Game of Thrones, which I don't watch, and he was in Blinded by the Light, which hit video recently. He is one of our two leads, and I was really struck how much, this is for Dark Shadows fans, I was struck how much he looked like a young Thayer David. Like, it was kind of distracting to me how much he looked like this guy who was on Dark Shadows many, many years earlier. And I can't think of his name, but he played Moriarty on the new Sherlock TV show. And he who played Sherlock Benedict Cumberbatch is in the film. But overall, it's mostly faces you don't recognize, which is great because it means I'm just looking at that character. The person who might be a recognizable actor, I'm not thinking about the actor and the other roles they may have played. I'm just saying, okay, this guy's a soldier in World War I. Very brutal at times, extremely disturbingly gory occasionally. That's war. It was really, really good. I would highly recommend seeing this on the big screen. I would recommend seeing this on the biggest screen possible. I'm a fan of the old Cinerama film format that I never was able to see. I hope one day to see a Cinerama film. But what Cinerama was 3 projectors, 3 cameras, I should say, shooting center, right, and left, and it was projected on a big curved screen, and you would sit, and it sort of filled your field of vision. Now, IMAX is the descendant of Cinerama in terms of that kind of visual presentation, and I would say if it's possible for you to see this movie in IMAX, that might not be a bad idea. It's not special effects laden and sweeping through canyons and aerial footage and all that. It's on the ground. But the way it's shot, relatively wide and very stable, is what you want in an IMAX movie. So often IMAX movies are just regular movies that are over-edited and badly shot that are just thrown up on a huge screen, and it just feels like you're sitting way too close to a TV screen and you can't see what the hell's going on. This is the kind of movie that would lend itself very well to an IMAX presentation, so I would really highly recommend seeing 1917. It doesn't matter if you don't like war movies, because this is much more of a survival tale than it is anything else. It's not so much about strategy and rolling tanks in and out. It's about 2 guys trying to survive in a really hostile environment. If you like horror movies, I think this isn't a bad movie. As far as the horror angle, there are moments in this movie where it could have immediately become some kind of a weird supernatural horror film, and I would have bought it. Because the tension is so heavy, and the subject matter at times is so grim, and the tone is so grim, and some of the things you see is so horrifying, I think if you like horror movies, I would give this one a shot. Speaking of horror movies, if you're interested, there's a movie called Death Watch, British horror film with Andy Serkis pre-Lord of the Rings and everything, from I think the late-ish 90s that I really liked a lot. And that's about soldiers in World War I out on the battlefield in no man's land, and weird things start happening. I thought that was really good. If you want to go back farther for classic World War I tale, it's hard to beat All Quiet on the Western Front from 1930. Fantastic early film. Also was remade for TV in 78 or 79 with Richard Thomas from Walton's, and I recall that being pretty good too. So there's a lot of World War I cinema out there. We don't see quite as much World War I on the big screen as we do World War II and beyond, so it's nice to honor those who served back then and see how little they had to work with technologically and how horrifying it was. It's amazing anybody came back at all. So that's all I saw in the theater this week. That's enough, right? See one good one and say, quitting when I'm ahead. Now we move on to that which I've seen and you can see on home video, on DVD, Blu-ray, VHS, if you want to take a DVD and record it to a VHS and then watch it, cable, streaming, on demand, whatever. First up, we'll go back over here. Man, set the camera up. Might as well use it. This is a film that actually is in the theaters. I put it here because this is like a transitional kind of film. This has been playing in theaters. This is also on Netflix right now. I don't know if and when it's getting a physical format release, but this is another film that was Golden Globe nominated and people won, Oscar nominated and people may or may not win for multiple cast members and crew and creative team. This is the story of a man and a woman who were involved in wedded bliss with child for many years, and unfortunately things have fallen apart and they are now in the midst of a divorce and they are looking back on what was their marriage story. Very, very interesting to me seeing films made for Netflix getting theatrical releases and seeing the quality of what some of these are. Earlier on, some of the made for Netflix stuff, you could see why it didn't get theatrical releases. A lot of stuff would go straight to video was always the same way. It's like you might have the cast, you might have the creative talent, but something doesn't quite work for it to make it big screen worthy. This year we had The Irishman, nominated for many awards, Oscars as well, and you had Marriage Story, and both outstanding. Marriage Story, not to tip my hand, but I thought Marriage Story was great. Certainly worthy of being in theaters, certainly worthy of seeing in a theater. I saw it on Netflix because I missed my chance to see it theatrically. It's sort of one of those smaller titles that's kind of working its way around. Once it gets all these nominations, I sort of imagine you're going to see it pushed back out into theaters again, like we have some other titles in this week. So you have Adam Driver, Kylo Ren from Star Wars, and Scarlett Johansson from the Avengers movies. And they're this happy couple in New York. She's an actress, he's a playwright, director, and they've come apart. And she goes back to the West Coast where she was originally from, and he is going back and forth between New York and LA trying to salvage things or deal with a divorce without lawyers and figure out custody of their son. And it's a little Kramer versus Kramery. It's much funnier than I expected it would be. Don't get me wrong, it's very sad and depressing. It's rough, because if you've ever been through anything like this to any degree, some things ring true. But also, I was really surprised how funny it was. I did not expect it. Everybody was saying how heavy this was and how draining this was. And I was laughing pretty early on, and I thought, wow, so this is more of a mix than I expected. People in this are really good. Driver and Johansson, really, really good. Some of the best work I've seen either of them do. Then you have Laura Dern as Johansson's lawyer, who's outstanding. And you have Ray Liotta as like a really vicious, sharky kind of lawyer, and he's great. And then you have Alan Alda show up as this super nice guy, kind of budget lawyer, and his stuff is hilarious in this movie. Like, really, really funny. Great to see Alan Alda again, and great to see him as successful at comedy as he still knows how to be. So it's just really good. It's outstanding. It's got surprises. It's sad. It's touching. It's hilarious. It's worthy of all the praise it's been getting, I think. You can watch it right now. You can pause me. Don't stop me, but pause me and go over to Netflix and watch this movie and then come back and watch the rest of the show. It's there, and I was very, very, very glad I watched it. Was there something else I was going to say about that? No, Laura Dern won a Golden Globe for her work in Marriage Story. So there's that. Funny enough, Scarlett Johansson is nominated for 2 Oscars this year, both as supporting and lead actress, and one of them is for this film. Now we move on to a film that is not nominated for anything other than Razzie Awards. It's actually, I haven't done this yet. I've made it up. I don't think I posted it on our Facebook page, and I would love to do a show around this if I can find the time. The best and the worst of the previous year's films. This, if it wasn't on my list of the worst of last year, I don't want to give anything away. It's very near to that. This is a new film by Ang Lee, art house director who also had some commercial success with Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and then later The Hulk and some other more mainstream things. It stars Will Smith as an aging hitman who finds out that there's a newer, younger assassin on his trail. And when he gets a good look at him, he finds out it's a younger version of him, who is the Gemini Man. Not to be confused with the Ben Murphy TV movie from 1976, which arguably was a better experience watching. So I went into this indifferently, as I often do for big dumb action movies that are CGI heavy, and I got what I expected from a big dumb action movie that's CGI heavy. You think with somebody like Ang Lee behind it, it's going to be better. Sometimes that is. Sometimes you see like an art house or a really good director take on something that's just kind of bubblegum fluff, and they do something different or better or brainier with it. Not the case here. This was, the effects were bad. The young Will Smith visual effects looked fake and cartoony. Whenever the mouth moved, it just didn't look real. In still images, it looks great, but when it's moving, it just looks phony. And there's a sequence where the young assassin, before he's unmasked, and by the way, that should be a surprise in the movie. Just saying. Just saying. The trailer should not be giving that away, because if you didn't know that was going to happen in the movie, it would be like, oh my God. But because you do know, you're like, just take the helmet off and get going. There's a sequence where there's a car chase with a motorcycle and it's shot not that great. And the motorcycle is clearly CGI. And it's the motorcycle going up over a ramp that's maybe 4 feet tall and then landing. And I'm like, you couldn't really have a guy do that? You have to have that be fake because it looks fake. The whole CGI thing where physics don't quite apply the same way and things don't have the same weight and they don't really look like they're there. That was happening during fight scenes and during like car chases, and it just looked like I was watching a video game. And personally, I get bored watching somebody else play a video game. Personally, I get bored playing video games. I don't want to watch a video game. I want to watch a movie. And so the effects were terrible. It's a film that leans heavily on the effects. Other than that, it's the old, we've seen it a million times, the assassin or the bad guy or the agent or whatever who just needs to do one more job and then they're out, but somebody doesn't want them to get out, or somebody's on their trail, or somebody... This is another one of those movies where the first time you see somebody, or at least for me, the first time I see a certain character, I'm like, that's the bad guy who's going to be unmasked at the end. And it's just like dull waiting for that to finally happen in the movie. I just thought it was bad. It was big, dumb action. It wasn't particularly good action. Will Smith is fine. I don't have a problem with him. But in this, it was just lame and heavy-handed. And Clive Owen is in it as a faux American with a really crappy accent. And I'm just like, just let him be British. Even if he's an American agent. So what? He was born in Britain and he's an American agent now. Whatever. Put in a line that says, when I grew up in Liverpool. It doesn't matter. Just the fake accents annoy the hell out of me. Anyway, I thought Gemini Man was crap. Probably fine if you don't really care and you just want to see some kind of action-y thing with a little sci-fi element to it on TV, but it just did not work at all for me. And it was one of those films that when it was over, I was happy when the credits rolled. My foot was hitting the pavement on the sidewalk outside before the third name and the titles came up. Now, speaking of films, while we're here, let's just talk about movies, shall we? We have a new Disney film, live-action Disney film, based on a character from Sleeping Beauty. I'm not going to say the title yet. Maybe I will, but when I say the word, it's just her name. It ain't the title. So Maleficent is back, as portrayed by Angelina Jolie, and she now has a goddaughter. This is following on the footsteps of the first Maleficent film, and that goddaughter is Elle Fanning, and she is the lovely, good-hearted, pure, and good positive energy princess girl, woodman person, nymph kind of lady who is going to be married. And it's a meet the parents. It's fairy book style. Fairy book style? I don't know. I need a drink of water. It is a meet the parents fairy tale storybook style where Maleficent and her evilness comes out of the woods and meets the goody-goody king and queen, we think, of the Prince Charming who's marrying her goddaughter in Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. So like any film aimed at children, epic battle sequences. I thought the first Maleficent was visually amazing. Wasn't passionate about it one way or the other, but it was great to look at. The makeup on Angelina Jolie is amazing. The look is amazing. The color with all the wispy colored smoke and all of that and the magic. Any movie where people are doing this at each other, I'm a big fan of. That's why I like the old Corman version of The Raven, because you get Boris Karloff and Vincent Price doing that at each other. So here we have, it is semi-comedic, the whole scenes where Maleficent is trying to be sort of human and polite and have manners while at a dinner with her in-laws, I guess you would say, Michelle Pfeiffer playing the queen. Arguably, not giving too much away, not that it's not given away in the trailer, Michelle Pfeiffer arguably more evil than Maleficent in this film. So yes, you have sorcery and wizardry and fantasy animals and epic battle sequences because, as the trailer gives it away, the race from which Maleficent comes decides to attack humanity after they feel they've been attacked. And it's visually, it is never boring. This is one where in the theater it looked great. This is one if you have a nice big old TV, big old 4K or UHD or whatever you got, it'll be a nice one to show that off. Depth-wise, it's a fairy tale movie. It's a Disney movie. You know how it's going to end overall, and it's nothing shockingly fresh, but visually it's really good, and everybody in it is quite good at what they are given to do. So I enjoy these movies fine. Like, I would not shed a tear if you told me there would never be another one. And I would never probably willingly watch one of these previous two again. But while I'm in the theater watching it, what a faint praise this is. While I'm in the theater watching it, it's fine. So and for kids, one of those things what they say under the rating that I enjoy, peril. There's fairy tale violence and peril in this film. Nothing a kid probably is going to be terribly disturbed by unless they're very young. I think probably the youth are the target audience for this, but if you have an eye for visuals and color like I do, I think as an adult, if I'm technically that, it may hold your attention. So I have one movie left in a half hour. Maybe I'll just talk slow. This is a film that is out. I saw this streaming. This is on various streaming services right now. I think it was Amazon Prime or Netflix, one or the other. This is a film from just this last year about a young man entering in the college world, college age, who is still visited, shall we say, by an imaginary friend he had as a little kid. An imaginary friend who, as a kid, almost caused the death of his mother. Now, how can an imaginary friend do this? Because, you know, when you look at it on paper, Daniel isn't real. So this is one that a lot of friends of mine have been watching over the last month or two and liking quite a bit. Some people were putting this on their best of last year for at least genre horror release best of lists. I didn't really care for it. It was very well produced. The effects are great. The makeup is very good. It's shot really well. Most performances are pretty good, but for me, the character of Daniel, the imaginary friend, he was trying to be wacky or out there or disturbing, and he was just fabulously annoying to me. And that just took me out of the movie. And it was one of those things where, okay, this is silly, this is cheesy, and I want this over with. So the basic idea is we meet this little boy when he's a little boy, the protagonist, and he meets this little imaginary friend who keeps telling him to do evil things, or, oh, you should do this and you should do that. And basically, he almost winds up killing his mother. They say, we're going to lock him in the dollhouse. And that's a way for this little boy to psychologically put this bad influence away. Somehow something happens later on in his life, in his late adolescence, early adulthood, and Daniel comes back. And basically the film is about, you know, is it a spirit? Is it a demon? Is it mental illness? Is it a, you know, what is this thing? What is this other person? Is he real? Is he not real? How much is he influencing this young guy's behavior and leading him down the path to madness and doom and murder and things like that? So it's not a dumb movie by any stretch. It's kind of clever in many ways. Which, you know, you're watching this wondering, well, is he real or not? Is this a spirit, or is this just this young guy's early onset mental illness that is just getting worse as he goes? But again, for me, it was that one performance that really kind of sunk it. That one performance and some of the content, I was just like, okay, yeah, you're edgy, whatever. But it is a film a lot of people like. So I would say if you're interested in this sort of thing, if it sounds interesting, hey, give it a shot. Because if you subscribe, I hate to say it this way, if you subscribe to a streaming service, you're paying for it anyway. So just shut it off if you don't like it. So I'm at the end of my list here, and we have 21 minutes. So I'm going to do something stupid. I said on Facebook, I put a little post on, we stream the show on Facebook. You're probably watching this on TV, in which case, thank you for having cable. The show streams live on Facebook and lives there. We put it on YouTube. It lives there minus the trailers. And I was just joking. I type up a little preamble before we do the show, and I just said what we're talking about today. And I jokingly said, and if we have time, Cannonball Run II. Well, you know, we have time. And I say, what the hell? So, I don't have a trailer for this. I don't have anything other than my own thoughts. I have my own 30-something years of thoughts on this. So I'm just going to ramble about Cannonball and Cannonball 2. And I really don't care if anybody doesn't like it. So here we go. Because I like to give people, you know, for all that you pay for this program, you should really get that full 57 minutes. So there was a movie called Cannonball Run in 1981. It's my favorite movie. I saw it multiple times in the theater. I saw it at a drive-in, which isn't there anymore. I saw it at a 3-screen strip mall movie theater, which isn't there anymore. And I saw it at a single-screen movie theater, which isn't there anymore. Which tells you, if Cannonball Run played somewhere in 81, they probably tore the place down now. This was a film starring Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise and Farrah Fawcett and George Firth and Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. And I could spend the next 20 minutes just telling you who's in it. If you don't know it, try it out. I love it. And if I love it, you know, it must be... This was a film, not the first film based on this actual series of races that used to go on back in the 70s that Brock Yates from Car and Driver magazine organized. And it was this coast-to-coast cross-country illegal road race. And it was, we're going to leave this place, the Red Ball Garage in New York City. You're going to punch a clock and you're going to show up at the Portofino Inn in Redondo Beach, LA, California. And whoever has the shortest elapsed time and over this, you know, period of a day or so is the winner, and you get bragging rights and a trophy. There are no rules. Get there however you can, and fastest time wins. So this was this thing that was reported on in Car and Driver, and it was reported on here and there. And then there were movies started getting made about it. Cannonball Run was not the first movie about the Cannonball Run. Arguably, for me, it was the best, but some people disagree. There was a movie called The Gumball Rally, which was about the exact same thing. They just called it the Gumball Rally and they changed some details, and it was pretty wacky. Feels very much like a studio film of the era. And that had Michael Sarrazin and Raul Julia and a few people you'd recognize. And it's a lot of fun. I don't like it as much as Cannonball Run, but it's a lot of fun. Then you had a movie called Cannonball! That was done by, produced by Roger Corman for New World Pictures, directed by Paul Bartel, who would also do, like the year before, he had done Death Race 2000, which is a similar idea too. Death Race 2000 was an all-star dark comedy about people who were racing across the country, and you would score points by running people over. It's known for having a young Sylvester Stallone in it, and David Carradine was the star. So the next year, Paul Bartel and David Carradine came back with Cannonball! Which was about basically a Cannonball Run kind of race. This was a bit more serious. It was fun. It was just a drive-in car chase, smash 'em up movie, but it was a little darker in tone than Gumball Rally was. Then several years pass. Stuntman, king of the stuntmen, director, actor, stuntman, Hal Needham, friend of Burt Reynolds, who had directed Smokey and the Bandit, had heard about the Cannonball, and he wanted to race in one, or he wanted to do a movie about the Cannonball. And he said something to Brock Yates about it, and Yates was like, well, they've done 2 movies already. And he's like, yeah, well, we'll just make the best one. So they started up another race. The race had been dormant for a few years because Yates was nervous that people were getting more and more into sports cars and somebody was going to get hurt trying to make these records. So in 1979, they did another Cannonball Run that left from Darien, Connecticut, and wound up in the Redondo Beach. And they had cars you see in the Cannonball Run movie were actually cars that, to some degree, raced in that '79 race. And they did that so that Needham could do it, and so that they could get stories that would wind up in the movie. The actual 1981 Cannonball Run movie is far more fact-based than a lot of people who don't do the research would know. I mean, lines of dialogue, incidents, there's a lot of stuff that really happened in that wacky movie. So Cannonball Run comes out in 1981, and it's a huge hit. It has Roger Moore in it, who is still James Bond. This is the same year he was in For Your Eyes Only, my favorite Bond film. The same year he was in For Your Eyes Only, he's spoofing that image in Cannonball Run. A lot of TV and movie actors. Jackie Chan, the way most Americans first saw Jackie Chan was in Cannonball Run. He had Big Brawl the year before, but I don't think that was as distributed and promoted as heavily as Cannonball Run was. And Cannonball Run was huge. It was big movie, and one of the top films of that year. And Burt Reynolds was still huge at that time. He was the tail end of him even wanting to be in car chase movies anymore. He had done, with Brock Yates as writer and Hal Needham as director, he had done Smokey and the Bandit 2 back in 1980, the year before, which I think was a terrible film. I don't know why it is. Every time I think I want to watch it again, I do, and I regret it. So Smokey 2 came out. Yates and Needham had collaborated. Cannonball Run comes out. It's huge. And then, for whatever reason, they take a couple years. And in 1984, 15 minutes to talk about Cannonball Run II. Fabulous. In 1984, we get Cannonball Run II. Cannonball Run II I saw at the Claremont Drive-In, Claremont, New Hampshire, where I saw Cannonball Run the first time, same screen. All-star cast once again. Story isn't really that much different. Point A to point B, fastest time. Burt Reynolds is back, Dom DeLuise is back. Jack Elam is back as the doctor, Nicholas Van Helsing, and University of Rangoon, where he went. And it's different, though. Cannonball Run 2, all-star cast, a lot of older, like TV comedian people. You had Artie Johnson, Louis Nye, you had Sid Caesar, you have Richard Kiel squeezed into a Mitsubishi car with Jackie Chan this time. And produced by Golden Harvest, interestingly enough. The company that was the company that Jackie Chan did movies for in the 80s into the 90s was the company Raymond Chow, who produced a lot of martial arts films too. They were the funding company behind the 2 Cannonball films, funny enough. So Cannonball Run 2 is the race put on because the Jamie Farr character, the Sheik from the original film, Ricardo Montalban, playing his father, is disappointed that his son didn't win the Cannonball Run race, so he decides he's going to put on his own Cannonball Run race, and he'll win that one. You got one more shot at this, kid. Bring pride to the family. And you get the same Ray Stevens theme song. You get 2 different ladies in the Lamborghini, different color Lamborghini this time. This time it's a red one. And you get Catherine Bach and Susan Anton as opposed to Adrienne Barbeau, and I'm slipping on her name. I should know that. And anyway, it's a fun cast. It's a cast that depending on who you are, you might remember a lot of these people. You might not. It's got people who were popular in TV and media of the day. And the thing that's different about Cannonball Run 2 is that there isn't really a race so much in the film. It starts off with race prep and everybody's getting their people together, and you have Mary Lou Henner and Shirley MacLaine as chorus girls playing nuns in The Sound of Music who Bert and Dom think are nuns, so they take them on the road, and there's hilarity there. You get Jim Nabors in the film. Bert and Dom this time are driving a military vehicle with diplomatic plates, and they're trying to blast through because it's the general. We have to get the general to the base instead of the ambulance this time. Sammy and Dean are in it again. This time, if I remember right, I think they dressed... I don't know Cannonball 2 as well as Cannonball. And I don't remember what they were driving as much because, as I said, there kind of isn't a race because there's this subplot where Frank Sinatra is involved and Charles Nelson Riley plays Don Don, and he owes money to Telly Savalas, who's another... Jaime, he's another gangster. I'm television time, I'm talking about Cannonball Run 2 in 2020. They basically, the Sheik gets kidnapped and everything stops and the race stops. And it's about these mobsters trying to get people out of the race, and it's about everybody trying to go back and get the kidnapped Sheik from the Pinto Ranch that Charles Nelson Riley owns. And it's funny, it's silly, and it's really loose and goofy, but it's not a race movie like the first movie was. So if you love the car stuff, you get a little of that in Cannonball 2, but it's really more a goofy comedy that's just a bunch of people hanging out and having fun. They touted it at the time as a big Rat Pack reunion because you had Sinatra and Sammy and Dean in the film together. They don't really share screen time altogether. I think the stuff with Frank was taped mostly separately, and it kind of feels that way when you watch it. But for a long time, I didn't like 2 because it was just... there was no race, and it felt like it didn't quite work as well. I've kind of come to terms with it now. I love that first movie so much that the second one is more time spent with friends. You get Charles Nelson Riley as a gangster. You get Michael Gazzo from The Godfather as a gangster. You get Alex Rocco. I mean, you get also from The Godfather, actually. Funny enough, these films were produced by Al Ruddy, who produced The Godfather. So the man who brought you The Godfather, arguably one of the greatest films of all time, is the man who brought you Cannonball Run 2. So it's fun. It's silly. Theme song by Menudo. It's the one Menudo song I like and own on a 45. They released that in Spanish and English. They had music videos in Spanish and English. I feel like the movie was just a year or two too late. It came out, I think it did okay at the time, but it didn't have the success the first one had. I don't think everybody was maybe into it quite as much. I don't think Burt Reynolds really wanted to make that kind of movie anymore. He regretted, he said later, making so many of those good old boy car chase movies. I think had this come out maybe in '82, this probably would have been a bigger success. I think still there's actually we'll go through the chronology because I still have 10 minutes. So it came out, it did okay, it played cable a lot, it was on video. Strangely enough, the soundtrack for the first Cannonball, which I thought had a great song, that Ray Stevens song, and I like a lot of the music in it, soundtrack was never released in this country. It was released on LP in Japan only, and for years the only way to get a legitimate copy of that was to buy a copy of that album from Japan for like $300. Now you can go on eBay and find them for a lot less than that. I waited 30 years, and I was able to buy a copy for a price I thought was reasonable. Cannonball 2 also did not have a soundtrack release here. It had the Menudo song. The Menudo song you could get on a 45 because it was Menudo and they were big at the time, which is why they were in the movie. A couple years later, 1989, we have Speed Zone. Why am I talking about Speed Zone? Why am I talking about Speed Zone? Speed Zone was the unofficial third Cannonball Run movie. The working title was Cannonball Fever, or Cannonball Run 3. It was a Cannon film. It was produced in Canada mostly with a lot of Canadian talent. And it's just, one of its major failings is that it's not a good old boy movie. And the first 2 Cannonball Run movies and Smokey were good old boy movies. And it had that feel, that down-home, badass, flaunt the law feel. This was a Canadian film. And it stars a lot of SCTV people. It's got some good people in it, and it's got some pretty good jokes in it here and there, too. You've got John Candy, Eugene Levy, you've got the Smothers Brothers, you've got Peter Boyle, you've got Brooke Shields, you've got Sherry Belafonte Harper, you've got some other people in it. It's just that it didn't have that same feel. You briefly get Jamie Farr in it at the very beginning to connect it, and they mention the Cannonball race, But overall, it didn't work, I thought. And Speed Zone basically killed the franchise. Until now. I was at a Cannonball Run event, a reunion of people who were at ran in the actual races and have run in subsequent races. It still kind of goes on. And Pam Yates, the widow, sadly, of Brock Yates, announced that there is a new Cannonball Run movie in the works. Major studio, I think Warner Brothers is working on it. Tom Lennon and Robert Ben Garant, who were in The State and Reno 911 and wrote Herbie Fully Loaded and a lot of other movies, they're writing the script. Apparently big fans of the original film. What I'm told is that it's not a remake. They do not have the rights to use the characters from the originals, which I think is good. All you need for a successful Cannonball Run movie, hot cars, a good cast, good stunts, and make it funny. Now maybe that's just easy to say, but do practical stunts, come up with some fun car stunts and car crashes, load it with people you wouldn't expect to see in it, people spoofing their image perhaps. I always thought you should put Vin Diesel in this as a guy who can't drive a stick shift or something like that, or is afraid to drive. And you could have fun. So there's a new Cannonball Run in the works. Last I heard, Doug Liman, who had done Go and the first Bourne Identity movie, he was maybe going to be the director, but you hear a lot of stuff. A lot happens between when something gets announced and when something comes out, and sometimes things never come out. But I would welcome more of these. I mean, I love the first one. I like the second one. I would love to see more car race movies that are shot and cut well, and are not big, dumb Fast and the Furious movies. I think you can still do it, and I think if it was a success, it's a formula. Just swap the actors out, swap the cars out, point A to point B, and there's some kind of challenge in the middle. Who knows what it is? I think you could have a series of these. There are other car race movies, like I mentioned, Death Race 2000. There's a movie called Safari 3000 that has Christopher Lee in it wearing what I remember looking like sort of a Darth Vader helmet. Rat Race, some people say, is similar. I'm not a major fan of Rat Race, but that's to me more like it's a Mad World than it is Cannonball Run. But there are several of those films. Somebody said there was a show called Blood Drive on AMC that I've not watched that they thought felt like a Cannonball sort of thing, but with more horror elements. I need to check that out. So anyway, I figured I would kill time by talking about the Cannonball Run II, and mission accomplished. I've done that. It's available on Blu-ray now. It's the first Cannonball Run is on Blu-ray, probably pretty inexpensively at this point. It always tends to be. Looks fantastic. Great commentary with Al Ruddy and Hal Needham on that first Cannonball Run disc. The stories in that are amazing and hilarious, and that's where I really learned for the first time, my God, this movie is much more fact-based than you'd imagine. Second Cannonball Run was put out on Blu-ray by Umbrella Entertainment in Australia, which sounds crazy, but you can order it on their website. The exchange rate between Australian and US dollars is very friendly to the US, and it's not region loaded. It's not region locked. So you could buy that disc and throw it in your player and watch it. And you can see Cannonball Run 2 in high definition. No extras, sadly. Not much on that disc other than the movie. But if you want to see it and you like it, it's there. I don't know that anybody in this country is going to race to put that out on Blu-ray. Gumball Rally is out on Blu-ray from Warner Archive. Cannonball is out on at least DVD from Blue Underground, that was Bill Lustig's company. And I think that has a commentary and a lot of extras on that Cannonball disc. So if you're into the cross-country road race thing like I am, there's a book called Cannonball that was written by Brock Yates. I don't know if it's still in print anymore. That's amazing. That's all of his original car and driver reporting and stories about all kinds of things associated with the original races. There's a movie called 32 Hours, 7 Minutes that I loved from a couple years ago. That was about people trying to see if a U.S. Express, which was a race that grew out of the Cannonball, if a record set in that people doubted if it could really be done in a modern day, with Alex Roy, who has a Cannonball record. That was a great documentary. There's a new movie called Apex about Alex Roy's attempt to beat those records. That's out now. There's a lot of stuff about this. So if you're into this like I am, there's a lot of visual material. It's a lot of books. As I said, the Cannonball book, Alice Roy wrote a book called The Driver. Ed Bolian, who beat Alex Roy's record, he has a book out. And every so many years, people still beat the record. It's not always an organized thing anymore. It's people who they document getting from point A to point B in that same, start and end place. And every once in a while, somebody figures out a way to do it better. And I think it's kind of cool. So I've yammered successfully for almost a half hour about a movie I like. It's amazing what you can do when you have nothing better to do. So I think I'm going to wrap it up with 4 minutes to spare. It's going to be 2 weeks until I'm back. We are closed. This office is closed next Monday, so I'll be back with 2 weeks worth of movies, which may well only be 5. Who knows? So until then, I will bid you a fond adieu. I am Mark. I am the Cinemaniac, and I will see you at the movies. Bye.